The invitation hymn is number 744.
You know what separates us from animals? For some of us, probably not so much. But one of the things that, and we're going to talk about one this morning and one tonight, but one of the things that separates us from animals is that we think about the future. When I say we, obviously I'm talking about humans. Now, other animals might consider, how they can get what they want to get. And so, if I want the apple up in the tree, then I know I've got to go to the tree and climb the tree and get out on the branch and get the apple, or shake it somehow to get the apple to fall on the ground. And so there's a thought process there somehow with animals. But one of the things that sets humans apart is we think about things down the line a little bit. We can consider choices that we've got to make, and, I can choose A and I can choose B, and if I choose A, then it's going to maybe go down this road of life, and here's how it might end up. I can choose B, and it's a totally different path, and who knows how that's going to end up. And so we can think about choices. We can discern maybe how things are going to play out in the future, like the lady who's doing this activity on the screen. An animal might just start going down all these little paths and, trial and error, figure it out. But a human might think about it and try to figure out, if I want to get to the end of the maze, what's the path that I need to take? And so we don't just go through life aimlessly. We know probably what we want to get out of it. And we know what we want the end to look like. We know probably what we don't want to have happen. We know, some things we want to stay away from, and things that we don't want people to say about us. And so we live our lives, and we choose A or B, or we choose what we want, or we set our hopes and our dreams and our desires, and then we live our lives based on those hopes, or based on those dreams, or based on what we want the end of life to look at or look like. And so that sets us away or apart from animals. One of the things, we'll talk about another one tonight, is that we begin with the end in mind, or we can. Now, it's possible that we can live not thinking like that. It's possible for us to go through life and not think about our choices or think about our decisions. We can go through life and not think about where this choice is going to take us, or where the path that we're on is going to lead us to. We can do that, and we can live an aimless, meaningless kind of life. Or today we can look at Matthew 25, and we can think about our lives at the beginning of this new year, a new day, a new week. We can think about the life that we're living, the path that we're on, and we can think about where that's going to lead us. And I hope that by looking at Matthew chapter 25 on the verge of a new year, we'll see that what we really need is to begin this year with the end in mind. Or begin this day with the end of this day in mind. Begin this week with, how do I want the end of this week to look 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, when eternity comes? How do I want my end to look? Once I've got that in mind, I can begin with that end in mind, and I can live my life accordingly. Here's what happens in Matthew chapter 25. We talk about this as a parable of talents, or it's a parable of wasted opportunities. I've preached it that way before. I think the last time I spoke on this, it was wasted opportunities. And those are there, but you can also look at this parable and see that it's a lesson from Jesus that talks about beginning with the end in mind. Now, here's what's happening. Jesus is nearing the end of his life, and he's got people who have followed him around for 3.5 years or so, and they're friends of his. They're, being comforted by his presence, and he's teaching them, and he's letting them know about what life is about. He is talking to them day in and day out. They've seen the lessons. They've heard his sermons. They've witnessed the miracles. They saw the blind man who can see now. They know the lame man can walk now. This is Jesus. But at some point along the way, Jesus lets them know that he's going to leave, and that he's going to go back to his rightful place at the right hand of God in heaven. And so their natural question is, well, what do we do? You've been with us for 3.5 years, and now you're leaving us. You're going to the cross. You're going back to heaven. What do we do now? Have we backed the wrong guy? What do we do when this void is in our life? We know Jesus has come to this earth, and he's led them around for a few years, and now he's telling them, I'm going back. And their question is maybe, what do we do in the meantime? What do we do between now, when Jesus is here, and then when Jesus has promised to come back? And in places like John 14, he says, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. And he says, I go to prepare a place for you. And I'm going to come back, and I'm going to receive you to myself. And that's great, and that's comforting for us to know that there's a prepared place for a prepared people, we like to say about heaven. It's good to know that's there, but what do we do in the meantime? I believe we all probably in this room know that heaven is there and believe that heaven is real, and we know, I think, that there's a destiny for God's people outside of this world. But we live here, not there. And we live now, not then. And so in the here and now, what we call the meantime, what do we do? What's our job? What's our role? What do we want the end to look like? And how then can we begin with the end in mind? Matthew 25, this master is going on a journey, and he's called his servants in verse 14 and has entrusted to them his property. Now, that's the meantime. The master still owns the property. He's just going on a journey, and who knows how long he's going to be gone. But while he's not present, he entrusts some things to his servants, his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 1, or 2, and to another 1, each according to his ability, and then he went away. Now, when you read talents, I don't want you to think of, singing and dancing and playing a guitar or whatever your talent in this world might be. A talent, in ancient terms, is a measurement. And it's likely how they're going to refer to resources. If your master leaves you with a talent of silver, then that's worth something. But if he leaves you with a talent, which is a weight of gold, then it's worth more. If he leaves you with a talent of dirt, then you really don't have much at all. Okay, so a talent is a measurement. We don't know exactly what this metal was. Some people estimate that it was about a year's salary. Some say it was an equivalent to us of about $300,000. At the end of the day, I don't know how much it is, but I know it's a lot. And so he leaves 5 measures of something with one servant, 2 measures of something with another servant, and then 1 talent with the third guy, each according to their ability, and he goes away. And so the master was there, and he was leading them around, and now he's going on a journey to a country, and we don't know where it is. We don't know when he's coming back. We don't know how long it's going to take, and he leaves them with some stuff. He entrusts them with some valuable things, and then he leaves. And they're stuck there in the meantime. And so verse 16, here's what he did. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 more talents. And so also he who had the 2 made 2 talents more, but he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. And so there are 3 guys in this story besides the master. One guy has 5 talents. He's been very blessed by his master. He's been entrusted with these many things, and he goes out and he uses what his master's given him, and by the time the master comes back, he's got 5 more talents. He's used these valuable resources his master gave him. The one who had 2, he didn't have as much as the other guy, of course, but he had something. So he goes out there and he uses what his master's given him, and he comes back with a couple of more talents, and that's good, right? Used what his master had given him. And then there's the 1 talent guy. And the 1 talent man, he's got something valuable. He doesn't have as much as the 5 talent man has. He doesn't have as much as the 2 talent guy's got. In fact, he's got half of what he's got and a fifth of what the other guy's got. So he decides, you know what? I don't want to lose it. I'm glad that my master blessed me with this, and he entrusted this to me, and he thought me worthy enough to have this valuable property of his. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to protect it. And I'm not going to lose it. I'm just going to go out back, and I'm going to find me a hole, and I'm going to dig it, and I'm going to bury this talent in that hole, and when the master comes back, I will be able to give back to him what he gave to me. And if you're thinking in worldly terms, maybe that's not so bad. There are a lot of ways that this guy could have wasted what his master's given him. I'm thinking about the prodigal son, maybe you are too, who asked for his inheritance early, and he goes and he wastes the money. He wastes his inheritance on riotous or prodigal living. He destroyed it. He's got nothing to show for it. When he goes back home, he doesn't have anything. He goes back home wanting to be a hired hand in his father's house just to have some food on the table and not eat the pods with the pigs. And the one-talent man doesn't do that, right? He's at least better than that. He's got the talent that his master's given him. He's buried it in the backyard. And when he comes again, I'll be able to dig that thing up, and I'll be able to give him exactly what he gave to me. Verse 19. After a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them, and he who had received the 5 talents came forward, and he brought 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents, and here I've made you 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little, and I'll set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had 2 talents, came forward and said, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents, and here I've made you 2 talents more. And his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little. I'll set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And then he also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward. He said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. And so I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the ground, and here you have what is yours. Not so bad, right? I know the man who had the great resources, the 5 talents, I know he went out there and he did some work with his. He gave you 5 more. Now you started with 5 and you got 10. He used what you gave him. He took the chances and he came out good. And I know the 2-talent man, he had less than what the 5-talent man had, but he went out there and worked, and he took the chances with the resources you've given him, and he came back with 2 more too. But I buried mine. You know, I had the resource, I had the talent that you'd given me, but I went out back and I buried mine because I know that you're a hard man and you expect to gather it where you've not sown, and so I was afraid. So I hid it in your back, and I'm returning to you exactly what you've given to me. I didn't spend any of it. I didn't waste any of it, but I didn't use any of it either. So he had less resources. And because he had less, he had fewer chances, fewer opportunities to gain something. But he had opportunities nonetheless. What he had that the other guys did not have are excuses. You're a hard man. You're a difficult person to please. And I know that you have great expectations. And I know that you expect to gather where you've not sown. And I sure didn't want to lose anything. I didn't want to waste what you've given me. And so here, I'm returning to you exactly what you gave. I want you to know this morning that we're one of those guys. Maybe you're somebody who has lots of what the Bible would call these talents. Whether it's money or not. Whether it's, what we refer to as talents or not. Every one of us has something that we can use to live a meaningful life. A few examples, maybe yours is that you can just talk to people. Some people in this room, I know it would scare you to death to stand up and to talk to somebody, to strike up a conversation. And I know that's the last thing you'd want to do. But some of you have that gift. You've got that ability, and you can strike up a conversation. You're a people person. It's a talent. That's a resource that you can use. Maybe you're somebody who you're easy to talk to. Some of us aren't. Some of us have a hard time listening, and I get that, but some of us listen pretty well. Maybe you're somebody who can provide a listening ear, and you enjoy that, and that's a talent that you've got. It's a resource maybe that God's given you. Maybe yours is leadership. Maybe you can use that within your home or within your business or maybe within the church. And so you can be a leader Some of us don't want to be leaders. Some of us are just more than content to follow along. That's okay sometimes. Maybe God gave you ability to lead. Or whatever it is. Maybe I'm not even in the ballpark of what you're good at. Maybe you're a creative person and other people are not. Maybe you're an organizer and other people are not. Maybe you're analytical in the way that you think. Maybe you're not. I don't know what your talent is or what God has blessed you with, what your gift is. I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know how many gifts you've got, whether you're the 5, the 2, or the 1. But what I know is that we've all got something. We all have some resource to live a meaningful life. Some have more than others, some have less than others, but we've all got something. With that comes an opportunity, responsibility, a chance to use it. Now, if you look back in the story, this parable, the 5-talent guy saw chances to use what his master had given him, the valuable property that he had, and he used those chances. The 2-talent man saw valuable things that his master had given him, and he saw opportunities and chances to use those things, and so he did it. The 1-talent man had valuable things that his master had given him, not as much as the others. He had opportunities, responsibilities, and chances to use what he had, but he didn't. So everybody's got something to live a meaningful life. Everyone's going to have opportunities to use what God has blessed us with. But if we're looking, the problem with all that is that we can also find excuses to not do what we know that we should. We can find excuses to not put our resources, talents, abilities, gifts, whatever, blessings, to work for the good of our God. This guy in Matthew chapter 25, he said, I know that you're a hard man and you want to gather where you've not sown, and so I was afraid and I went and I buried my talent in the backyard. Maybe this year, whatever God has blessed you with has been buried in the backyard somewhere. You didn't lose it. You didn't waste it. But you didn't use it either. And so maybe where you are on this last day of 2017 is not where you thought you'd be. Or maybe where you find yourself on this last day of this year is not where you want to be. And you are here just kind of by accident. You didn't really get here on purpose. You just kind of went with the flow, like the 1-talent guy. And you didn't really ruffle any feathers, and you didn't rock the boat any. You didn't put to use what God has given you, whatever it was. And so here's where you ended up. And it very well could be that today we're here because we did not begin with the end in mind. And so looking at this story, here's how it ends real quick. If we go back into Matthew 25, he was afraid. But verse 26, his master answered him, you wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I've not sown and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have at least invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received what was my own with interest. And so take that talent from him, give it to the one who's got 10 talents, for to everyone who has more will be given, and he will have an abundance, and from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And then cast that worthless servant into the outer darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so it ends badly for that guy. It ends great for the guys who used what their master had given them. They are entering into the joy of their Lord, and they are serving there alongside him. But this 1-talent man who did not waste anything, he just didn't use it, right? That's all that happened here. This 1-talent man is called wicked and slothful. Not because he wasted anything, but because he just didn't use what his master had given him. So what do we do with that? And what's the message of this for us? Here's why it's important for us today to know what Jesus is talking about in Matthew chapter 25, because this year, all right, you have the same resources you've got last year, right? None of us are totally different today than we were yesterday, and when we wake up tomorrow, January 1st, 2018, we're not going to be totally different people, probably. But we're going to have different opportunities. Who we are is probably not going to change. We're the 5-talent guy, the 2-talent guy, or the 1-talent guy. But our opportunities to use those talents will change. And the chances that God gives us, the doors he puts before us to put those talents to work, to use what he's blessed us with, whatever it is, those things might change. And so as we go through this year, I think we can all probably agree that we're going to have doors open, windows of opportunity, chances to use what God has blessed us with. Now, what are we going to do with those opportunities? That's the question here. What are we going to do with the chances that God gives us to use what he's given us? I'll tell you what the question is not. The question is not, how come I don't have 5 talents like she's got? The question that the talent guy number 2 asked is not, how come he's got more than me? That's not what they said. What they said was, how can I use what God has given me? And so this is not a comparison thing. It's not, how come he's got more or she's got more than I've got, but at least I got more than that guy. It's not a comparison game at all. It's, what can I do with what God has given me? What am I going to do to leverage the opportunities that God puts before us? Whether it's 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 or who knows how many I've got, what am I going to do with what God has given me? Maybe for you it's a family thing. Maybe your family and your household, or you're going to be growing this year. There's a baby, an addition to your family in your future. So you're going to grow. That's a blessing, opportunity that God has given you. What are you going to do with that? Maybe you're on the other end of it, and this year your family's not going to grow, but instead it's going to decrease in size. And I know we don't like to think about those things, but how can we use those opportunities too? Be serving God as best we can. And so in a day, in a week, in 2 weeks, in 2 years, in 6 months, what do we want that end to look like? Where do we want to be in 2 weeks? Where do I want to be in 6 months? Where do I want to be exactly 365 days from right here, right now? What do I want my end to look like? How can I start this year with that in mind? For many of us, there are probably things in this new year that we need to either add to our lives or to cut out from our lives. Those are biblical things, to put off the old and to put on the new. Maybe it's a budget kind of thing, and we want to be more generous with our money. We want to help people whenever they've got needs, but we can't because we got so much stuff tied up in our responsibilities. So maybe I want to live on a budget and be more generous at the end of the year. Some of us maybe need to stop a habit or an addiction. So maybe that means we've got to, at the end of this year, want to be free from that addiction, free from that habit, and so maybe I start with that end in mind. I do what I got to do to get there. Some of us maybe need to start some good habits. So at the end of this year, I want to be able to say that this is where I am, and I've got these good habits, and I got these good things in my life. How do I start this year with that end in mind? Maybe for you, it's a daily prayer time, or for your family, it's a little bit of time in the Bible at the end of the day. Some of us maybe need to stop arguing with our spouses and our kids so much. Whatever it is for you. You're standing at this day, 365 days from now, at the end of 2018. What's that end look like for you? How do we start this year with that end in mind? Finally, some big picture. We've been talking about years. Let's talk about a life for a second. At the end, when I'm on the deathbed, or when I'm laying in the funeral home, what do I want them to say then? What do I want people, I hope if I go before you, you come to my funeral, what do I want you to say about my life at the end? What are the things that I don't want you to say about my life whenever we come to the end? And then with that end in mind, am I beginning in a way that gets me there? And at the end of all this, when our time on earth is over, when we're meeting the Lord, learn what our eternity is going to be. What does that end look like? When the Lord returns, maybe, and we meet him, is it a good day? Is it something we can look forward to? Or is it a time that we dread, that I'd rather not think about? So big picture, when all this is over, when we finally made it to the very end of this maze that we call life, We're not in the meantime anymore. The talents have been given. They've been taken back. The opportunities that were there, they're not there anymore. The excuses still might be. But when all this is said and done, what does my end look like? What do I want it to look like? When I meet the Lord, what do I want his reaction to be? Do I want it to be, of course, like the 5-talent man and the 2-talent man? Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Lord. How do I make that happen? How do I stay away from, depart from me, wicked and slothful servant? Here's what I know. At the end of this new year and on the verge, or end of this old year on the verge of a new year, here's what I know. Our Master wants nothing more than to share his joy with us, with his sons and his daughters, Christians like us. And so this new year, I want you and I want me to begin with the end of this day, this week, this month, this year, this life in our minds. Because one thing we know is our Master is going to come back and he's going to settle accounts. He's going to look at what he gave us, what we did with it, in order to settle up those accounts. He's going to come back and see what we did with the opportunities that he blessed us with in this life. In the end, I want to have a good answer for what I did with what he gave me. Today, I hope you want to have that same answer as well. And I want you to begin this year with the very end in mind. Maybe today you need to make some changes. Maybe you're not a child of God right now. You're not a son or daughter of the King. And today maybe you want to make that right and you want to give your life to God and be baptized into Christ. Maybe today what's probably more likely is that you are a Christian and you began this Christian life when you were baptized into Christ. You rose up to walk in newness of life, but you didn't. Instead, you just kind of kept going with the flow and you kept going through the motions, and we maybe just were status quo. And like the 1-talent man, God blessed us, God is blessing us, but we're just not doing anything with it. And so maybe here at the end of an old year, at the verge of a new year, you want to decide, I'm going to do whatever I can with whatever God has given me. Whatever that talent is, the blessing, the gift you've got, maybe use that for the glory of God. Maybe there's some things that you want to pray about today, and I'm telling you, we are your family in Christ, and we want to pray with you about whatever's going on, but you've got to let us know. And so this morning, let's begin with the end in mind. And if you need to make a change in your life to get that started, let's do it right now while we stand and while we sing.